So I was looking at the syllabus. Sabi ko nga, we've never had this in our time when we were trained as senior leaders. It was really more of actual work done, uh, one-on-one mentoring. And this is the second group we're doing it, so it's good. And then looking at the coverage of the talk, watching over environment, supposed to be a senior leader, watching the environment of the men, you know. But in this case, good evening. Good evening. In this case, we'll also just talk of general environment to include our spouse, our children, and other people surrounding us. Okay, so we're talking about environments, and all right. So let's start off by going through some terminologies. Then from there, see how or how Christians view environment, and moving on to more specific things of environment as it relates to our community in Ligaya. And towards the latter part will be what senior leaders can do to improve um, surroundings around us. So if you look at the dictionary, environment simply means just our surroundings, the external factors and forces surrounding and affecting an organism, person, or population. So it's a very general statement. Anything surrounds us is our environment, no? Living or non-living, um, a group, or number of people. Now, if you go through further uh, terms of environment, it can be broken down into the natural and the social environment. So we've said natural environment talks about living and also the non-living things. On the social environment, this is where we're more concerned with. It's a culture that we are in. No? What is a culture? These are the people that make up the environment. So it's the way of life that we live in, um, whatever group or even localities can form can have its own culture, and the people and the institutions that interact with it. So it's made up of how they do things, what they believe in, how they behave, and obviously because of that, that makes up their um, values, morals, and the things that describe that particular environment. Quick example of uh, the way Filipinos, no, would live out their social environment. We have such a culture that pertains only to our brethren, our Filipino brethren. For example, Christmas, as we spend Christmas, as we hear the Burr month, that is the start of supposedly our Christmas celebration, gift giving. Um, the idea of our godchildren visiting our homes between Christmas and New Year. Um, I was just reminded of one of my godsons' wedding, and was so happy to have a son, and brought him to the house after Christmas. Then I just realized, it's part of the tradition. No? As he went around to introduce his son to all the wedding sponsors. Sabi ko, ganun pala yun. And yung mga ginagawa nating honor and respect to our elders, mano po. You see that right after we celebrate the Eucharist. We see the children going to their parents and making mano. You'll only you'll only see that and hear of that in the Philippines. Um, Religious beliefs, religious cultures, the Nazareno, for example, or the Triduum, going through the up until flagellation and nailing of the cross. Probably that's only we're one of the few countries that has that kind of a culture. Now, there could be also, oh yeah, when we go, when you see our drivers or taxi drivers passing through a church, what do? They make the sign of the cross. You never see that in other countries. Of course, there are the good and the bad side to our environment, the people surrounding us, because these are also the behavior that probably we are guilty of. For example, police giving you a ticket for making a left on a no left turn, and what do? We try to get away by talking, if not pleading to get away, we try to corrupt them, in which they readily accept. So somehow we're all part of that culture in doing that part of corruption. No? We see how, sabi nga natin, the culture of respecting our elders, but when queuing time comes, and when you go to the MRT and see a crowded train, you hardly see people standing up, men standing up to give way to women, pregnant women, elderlies. Nawawala na yun, no? Somehow that's gone. Talking about crab mentality, I think we're very known for that, no? Now, with the impeachment of Chief Justice, you see all the justices turning their backs on her, pulling her down. Typical crab mentality. So these are the cultures that we have. I remember when the Pope came here, how much preparation we did to make sure that we don't go beyond the sidewalk, people barrier, doing all of that, and still people would just jump out and then try to get us close to the Pope Mobile. And then a friend of mine was in Korea. Apparently, he said it was better to see the Pope or hear him say Mass in Korea because there weren't as many fanatics or as many Catholics as the Philippines. And all they did was to draw a chalk line on the street, which means do not cross. There were no people barrier, there were no strings. So they were just standing there, waving. But that's the culture that they have. It's well disciplined. Na siguro yun ang mga kulang natin. When the Christians' view on environment, it's really asking us to be good stewards of God's creation. And our responsibility is how to take care of the resources, the gifts that the Lord has given us. So being good stewards asks us to care for our Mother Earth as well as those living in it. No? So in our case, it's really caring for our brothers and sisters here, in especially the less privileged, helping them out in whatever way we can. And if you recall the last conference, there was a question asked about why isn't Ligaya taking sides as far as the move on contraceptives or the move on divorce, etc. And sabi nga ni Ed Mendoza, you don't have to wait for Ligaya to take on an action on anything that we believe in. You can do it on your own individually. without having to rely on persons or groups to spearhead. So, if we look at one of the encyclical of Pope Francis, um, he says that talking about Mother Earth, now we can just say hindi lang protect Mother Earth, but protect really the people in this planet of ours, because this is the only planet we have. No, so he endorses climate action and has made cases on Christian environmentalism on several occasions, saying take good care of creation. This is what Saint Francis wanted. People occasionally forgive, but nature never does. If you don't take care of the environment, there's no way of getting around it. So it's very clear that if we do not take care of our environment, that's why you have a lot of calamities, Tacloban, Baguio with all the slides in because of the cutting of the trees. You know, you have all of these tawag mo na? Erosions. It's just man-made, no? That's the environment that we are in. Now, some components of our environment, and now this is more specific to our Ligaya, our community. Again, we've said earlier about people's beliefs, their attitudes, which forms the culture, because that is what makes up their behavior. And it can be a group that can be strong or weak. I remember early years of Ligaya, people were talking about the strength of community. And sabi ko, what differentiates this from other groups out there, civic group? Sabi niya, well, we have Rotaries, you have Lions, you have all these other groups, but they're not as committed in terms of people belonging to it. They're in and out, and that's where Ligaya comes in, where after 42 years, we're still here, and we're still that community where hopefully we've developed the right environment for people to live in, no? Our brothers and sisters. So what makes a strong environment or a weak one is really dependent on the people running or has the influence on the environment. So we need to have a strong, positive, and dynamic environment. So that's probably a key word, dynamic environment in the community. And maintain our commitment, motivation, and changes that comes along in our community. So again, one of the reasons why most of us, at least I can speak for myself, joining community 32 years ago, 1984, 34 years ago, kami ni Gigi, sabay kami ni Gigi, no? It's because at that time, we were part of the parish, but we needed more than just attending our obligations. We needed something more in terms of relationship, and that's where Ligaya had started Couples for Christ. No? So Gigi and I met up there under Couples for Christ, and from Couples for Christ, after 2 years, we were invited to the weekend of Ligaya. So that was 1984. Why? Well, ako again, speaking for myself, sabi ko nga, kulang yung parish. And up until now, you see their blessed program, hindi blessed tawag nila eh. BLC. You see their BEC. You see all their programs that they're trying to pattern after communities, but somehow it's not as effective as our community. No? So It's really all about um, the people leading it, the people that make things happen to help and form that dynamic environment. And as I was reading through this talk, I was reminded of Manny's talk on holiness, if you still remember, during the community conference. He dwelled on the challenges of environment. No? So, what are these challenges? So, he mentioned that God's plan for creation was to create a suitable environment so that man can thrive and govern well the world created for him. So, this is God's plan. No? It's not something that is man made, is by plan, part of God's calling for us to live and lead and make sure that we have that dynamic environment. Now we are challenged by new realities. What are these? Logistics for one. No? That's why we have all this problem about um, yung mga ano natin, attendance, complying with the requirements of community, our way of life. Um, Partly because of traffic, partly because of cost of traveling now, and there are so many other things building up as we face the new changes in our environment. Um, I was talking about well, also about secular world. No, this is where somehow political gets in the picture, and then the relabeling of sin. He mentions something about respectable sin, and then changing the norms or the new age values. We talked about in the political arena the move to impeach CJ. So spearheading that is none other than Alvarez. Then all of a sudden you see Alvarez having a word war with Duterte's daughter Sara, the mayor of Davao. So there's no such thing as commitment, no such thing as brotherly love. It's really political. From one thing you're on this side, the next day you're on the other side, and Manny mentioned the thing about frog. If you remember, you put a frog on the boiling water, it just jumps out. But you leave a frog and slowly pour in lukewarm, turning it into warm, into hot. Eventually, the frog gets used to that condition and live comfortably in it. No? And that is how we are in this environment. That if we go through the respectable scenes and say it's okay, that's part of life, that's part of where we live in, then somehow it gets on us to become a practice more than anything. No? Something that we used to say was a sin to begin with, and this is now something that's respectable, pwede na yan. And then also Manny mentioned about the prophecy of the three children back in Fatima 100 years ago, and he says that the final battle between the Lord and the reign of Satan will be about marriage and the family. So it's really attacking our family. And we can see that already. The House almost passing the third reading of the divorce bill. Now we'll find out if that will get to the Senate or not. We'll see how strong our senators are, because if that doesn't pass through there, then that will not get through. But then again, the senators are talking about not divorce bill, but trying to be more lenient in our annulment process, making it cheaper, making it shorter to process. Parang ganun lang yun. It's a way of making things easier instead of working out solutions to strengthen the family, strengthen the relationship of husband and wife. It's the contrary. No? They're trying to come up with so many laws, and we're one of the probably country left that does not have any divorce.
The only country.
The only country now, other than the Vatican. No?
Yeah.
So and then we're saying that the way of life that we always speak of in Ligaya and the sword of the Spirit should be taken as a whole. So it cannot just be choosing the things that we like. You can only do MWG. I'm sorry, I can't attend our once a month sectoral assembly or once a quarter community gatherings, such as the conference, such as the anniversary, such as the Feast of the Covenant. This only happens once a quarter, and still we find reasons to not to go. No? When we started community 34 years ago, South was just one district then, and we were holding our teachings in Ika, that's next to Xavier, 3 in the afternoon. Although hindi pa ganun ka-traffic then, and gas was not as bad, I guess, but still, it wasn't easy for us to do our formation courses and training there at that time. And with Father Herb, you've heard of how he was so strict then. If he says 3, at 3 or 5, he closes the gate. So if you want to attend our assembly, you do it from the outside the gate. So ganun kahigpit. So when we talk about punctuality, that was how true we were, no? In making sure that we were there 15 minutes before the call time. Yun ang training namin, no? Of course, things are changing now with traffic, etc. And then Manny also mentioned about creating the environment, that dynamic environment that will predispose us to discipleship. So discipleship should be deeply rooted in our systems, and God's grace will allow our hearts and minds to be transformed. So here, that's already the key to all of this. It's about discipleship. Without discipleship, I guess it would be more difficult for us to make our environment the way we want it to. At least in our small own ways, in our MWG, district, sector, and community, with that kind of an environment in our community, it has helped our children, first our spouse, to make sure that the relationship is there, to love and care for one another, and then of course our family, bringing them all before God. If there's anything that we probably have done that we have not really taken note of, is planting that seed in our children. Sometimes we blame ourselves why our children are not in community. Like I only have a son, one child, and for all these reasons growing up in his teenage years, he attended once or twice a summer camp. No? Because other than that, he was into the school's baseball team, and the whole summer they'd be playing tournaments out of the country. And graduating from Southridge, Opus Dei, so sabi ko, they don't believe in charismatic as much. They the way they receive communion is still through kneeling. So these are their environment in Opus Dei school. No? So getting him to be part of the charismatic in our group, it's a struggle. But sabi ko, I'm sure the seed has been planted, and wherever God calls him, he will have his own way of building up that environment. Okay, so now we started talking about discipleship, and that's another key element for us to be able to control and bring about this environment for the man that we will care for as senior leaders, and also for the community, by really taking on God's yoke. dati ang description namin is how would you describe yourself um, as truly um, somebody who cares for your brothers and sisters in Ligaya. So we always say that to the extent of giving our life to that person. Now you hardly hear that. No? How far would you go, brother, in protecting this person? Or no? Hardly now you hear na, until I'm all the way until I am willing to give up my life to that brother. Diba? But in among the now, if you ask them, they always say that they will forever be disciple and and die with their boots on. No? So because okay, at least we still have those descriptive words. But really, we were called to Ligaya, especially as senior leaders, as we will be soon. Is that when they ask you how serious are you about being a senior leader, bro, I'm ready to die for you. Yeah, that was a simple thing, and it's not an overacting word or no. It's really where we are, and it's probably without us knowing it. We're doing it already. We're taking that extra mile in helping our brother, sister, in whether financially at work, in relationship in the family. That's what we are. Now, what is the typical environment that we should look for? No, there are a list of things for this. The next two slides. So quickly, if you have your Ligaya card, we used to have our Ligaya card that was given to us, commitment card, and then yung last one given to us was a self examination of where we are, no, Ligaya. So talks about few relationship. One, our relationship with God. Living a loyal member of the church, being part of the parish, regular prayer time, scripture reading, free from serious sin. And then we talk about relationship with community. There are two things with community: relationship with community and relationship in community. So with community, it talks about participating in attending all the activities, the events, the gatherings, going through our outreaches and helping build up pathways, for example, talking about finances through tithe. And relationship in community is about faithfully attending our MWG, supporting our brothers and sisters, because that is the nucleus of our communities in your MWG, no? Being brotherly and sisterly to one another. And then it talks about family relationship, husband and wife, respect for the spouse, and then raising up our children because good stewards, as the Lord has given us our children, following community teachings, and among singles, supporting them in their career, supporting them in their courtship pattern, in their state of life, and our own personal formation. Our belief in Ligaya, our conviction, because God has placed us here. Otherwise, we would not be wasting our time attending our weekly MWG or monthly gatherings, sectoral and district, that we relate in a Christian way, in love for one another as brothers and sisters, being good witness. No? So, if you just go through this, that already describes what the kind of environment is needed, no, for Ligaya to continue being what it is, a support group for our family, for people around us at work. So it's really venue to do God's will. It's a source of our strength in Ligaya, supporting one another with our committed relationship, worshiping and tatawa ako nung weekend our frat group spent the weekend 2 nights in Baguio, and sila Willie, Salvador and Sonia was doing because they were supposed to attend the 70th birthday of Willy's sister here in Manila, but because we were in Baguio, they did a coverage, no, and sent it to a relative here, so they could show it during the reception. And while they were taping Sonia and Willy's congratulations to the 70th birthday, the sister, ang unang bukas bunganga ni Willy, we praise you, nagtawa na kami. Sabi ko, yan, you're not doing a worship. Naging normal sa kanya, whenever he opens his mouth. Of course, his intention was to say congratulations, sister, Marsh ang pangalan, on the 70th birthday, pero bukang bunganga niya, we praise you, Lord. Sabi ko, hindi to worship, ha? Talagang ingrained na sa kanya eh. Sabi ko, yan ang talagang brother, no? So, maski siya, natawa siya eh. And then, of course, doing our service to our mission, living a common way of life, as we call it, our radical discipleship, providing a secure and safe environment for family, for children. Now, transgenerational, we want, just last sectoral assembly, there were a few of the sisters, UD, who did their commitment, underway commitment. It's third generation na yan. So, sila De Leon, Wally and Ampi's grandchildren, and the second one was
Kaya anak ni Sara.
kay Saret.
Ay.
Tama. Oh, Benny and Meg Saret.
Ni Emong, yung lolo nila si Emong.
Emong. So, third generation na yan. So it's all about being good disciples, no? Now, what are we responsible for in fostering this dynamic environment? So these are the specific things that is expected of a senior leader now. Okay, now we are expected to watch over our district, of course. You will be given certain assignments in your service track, handling, if you have 6 MWGs in your group, maybe handling 3 of each group. You'll be asked to, without being asked, you should be on your own, voluntarily going out and reaching out to those who are in need, the sick, visiting the sick, visiting probably brothers in their place of work to see how they are, how the environment is in their place of work. Sensitive to things that are happening in their group. A lot of cases where members leave underway or even covenanted is really because of leaders not being sensitive to what is happening in their life. No? Of course, having to have contact with people, especially those that were placed under us. So these are specific things that is asked of senior leaders. Parang coordinator na pala ito, no? Pag ginawa mo yan, yan na rin ang ginagawa ng coordinator. Coordinators lang are asked to know each and every member, including their children, by name, and what they do, and where the children go to school, and how many grandchildren they have, to that extent.
Pati grandchildren.
Pati grandchildren. Tumatanda na rin ang mga coordinator. Alzheimer na rin. So what are the things now for senior leaders to do to foster that dynamic environment to speak of, no? So again, these are the basic things that are expected of a senior leader. So ito na yung doing, no? Kanina was the wish list. Now this is the doing part, which is really to share our lives, because it's hindi ka hanga or people will not really believe in you if you don't preach or do the things that you're supposed to do, walk the talk, and give something. It's hard to give something that you don't have. No? So you have to really walk your talk, teach them, and of course, part of our teaching as senior leader is the area of correction. If you see a brother um, in a state, in a misbehaving state, that you should go out of your way and be able to correct the brother. And the brother should realize that it's part of the senior leader's responsibility in doing those things. No? There was a question raised earlier. It was a small group discussion. Why isn't there the word pastoral care in the documents of Familia or even BCBP for that matter? No? And that's where our community is differentiated from the other partners in missions that we have, because we are a covenanted community. Being a covenanted community, one of the things that's asked of us is to be able to pastor, meaning to provide directions, provide guidance, give advice, as I said, correction if need be, on a brotherly way, no? Asking forgiveness if we have hurt somebody. So yan yung pastoral care natin. And this is exactly why Ligaya has been kept through all of these 42 years. Helping our members identify who they are with, why they're in community. So it's even more difficult now for members to take on the way of life. Unlike before, we have the underway commitment done right after Foundations 1. So ngayon binago. You can only do your underway commitment after Foundations 2, which is a series of 12 or 14 talks. Or more than that now, I think. So pabigat ng pabigat ang ang hinihingi ng Ligaya for members before they can be, like last Sunday sa sectoral, qualified to be underway members. They really have to commit themselves. They really have to know what Ligaya is about, taking on its mind, taking on its way of life. Now, being able to handle problems probably is a skill that you need, no? And maybe not all would have a solution or advice to give. Then you just turn it over to your coordinator and pass it on and discuss it. And I'm sure things can something good will come out of that, no? Now, we also talk about particularly Ligaya's customs, the way we do things, you know, the way we have known to probably either heard about it or seen about it and do about things that Ligaya does. No? What are some of the things common to community? The way we greet one another, the way we hug our brother, the way we greet our sister, beso beso. Or, do you know how to greet a sister?
Side to side, di ba?
Yes, but those sisters who are more than just side to side, if they want to make beso beso or cheek to cheek, how is that done? Who takes the initiative?
Oh, the sisters.
Okay,
Sisters.
so you have to wait for the sister to come, and if they want to go, you know, one side cheek or two sides cheek. But if there's no initiative coming from them, just give them a hug, brotherly hug, sisterly hug. Of course, we say opening doors. I don't know how many of us still do that. May kwento nga sa G, if you remember, sa ika natin. This is a true story, by the way, about opening doors. there was a couple that came in and attended a formation talk. And by the time they came out, the husband said to the wife, "Why are you still in the car?" Said, "Yeah, that's because you didn't open my door." So she never left the car until he opened the door, and she wasn't able to attend the talk. Before we say that you cannot start your meal, no? If there's a party, for example, until you see your coordinator taking his food or going through the buffet line and eventually taking that first spoon, no? Again, that's before. Now, I don't know if it's still done. No? Kanya-kanya na. What's still courtship pattern? We still make sure that that is being followed, especially if the single sister and the single brother are both from community. More difficult if one of them is out of community to apply the courtship pattern that we have. So I just heard Steve's daughter just got engaged.
Mm-hmm.
So how was the courtship pattern? Okay naman? First phase, second phase, all the way
She followed it
to the end. Oh,
to the
difficult as it may
The
be.
father saw to that.
I did not. I wanted to do as little as possible. But they went through the system.
Both of you.
Yes, they are from both
North lang nga yung brother.
north of.
So magkakaharana. Yan pa isa, harana. Diba?
Yeah.
Ano pa yun? Culture ng Pilipino natin, despedida de soltera. You can't see that in the States. Harana in our community, that's never done anymore. So yun ang mga specific natin, no? Na hindi lang common to people outside, but specifically to members of community. Okay, now, this is still part of the things that we can do to foster a dynamic environment, our outreaches and services. As I said, being sensitive to groups that may have some dissenting opinion. So if you notice, community in any political arena never took side except for people power, because Cardinal Sin asked of all of us to go out and support the military. Beyond that, political setting, whether it's local, national, community will never make a stand. Yesterday, if you saw the full page ad of Couples for Christ on their stand against the divorce, yan ang very talagang forceful group, no, that want to bring about a point. Bigaya maybe will take part of that later on with other partners in mission. So it's that milieu, no, yung environment na, no, it's creating that climate that we speak of. Of course, in all of that is putting God in the center of all of the things that we do. And when we do things, we make sure that we do it through and through, maintaining its course and not just for the time being. All right, so going to the last part of the talk now is really what are the seniors' role in all of these senior leaders. So basically, three things are being asked of us. Is one, that we should be trustworthy. Trustworthy in the sense that when a brother has something that concerns him, to be able to come and open up, no? And pag sinabi niya, bro, this is something confidential, and make sure that it doesn't leave the room. No, that's how much trust that your brother will. That's how much trust that you have to gain from your brothers in your group. Um, Actually, hindi lang naman in the group. I've had brothers from other districts also coming to me. Uh, Maybe they could not open up to their own PLs and coordinators, lalo na yung mga kagolf namin ni Ricky. They come to us and talk to us about concerns nila. But for us, they're brothers, so okay lang. You know, bro, ito magbibigay ko sa yung advice, etc. Encouragement to discern, well, to know exactly what the good from the bad. No, that is a discernment process, and of course, encouraging the good and discouraging the bad. Here, we really have to seek God's will to help us guide our members, the men placed under us, and as we read through 1 Peter, we have to set an example to the flock. No? And this is our Pope Francis would be the best person. Sabi nga niya that we should not only be shepherds to our flock, but we should smell like our sheep, no? To that extent na kung anong amoy nila, yun din ang amoy natin, no? Kung anong ginagawa nila, yun din dapat ang gawin natin. And just to further emphasize the call of community, this is a prophetic sense long time ago. I saw this in one of our documents of we're ending our 3-year plans for Ligaya 2018, and I saw this in that sabi ni Tony Venezuela, who's migrated to Canada. Sabi mo sa kanila, there is a bigger community out there. Your community is not meant to keep you in. So, but it's meant to be it is meant to be a place of refuge, resting, refreshment, for strengthening as you do the battles. You are meant to go out, not stay within the walls of Ligaya. So in Ligaya, you have me, the Lord, and one another, brothers and sisters. Outside, my people don't even know me. They are forced to know only the dark side of life and the influence of this world and the evil one. So again, our calling through our prophetic word, and I'm sure the same way in the sword of the Spirit, we are really called to reach out and not just to stay within our 4 corners, 4 walls, but really to go beyond. No? Not even just, as I said, not only a senior leader in your district, but really as a senior leader to the whole community, reaching out and being able to carry on that tradition, that dynamic environment that has already been there through these years. It's not difficult because all we have to do is just continue with the tradition. Then community can last for another 50 years if you wanted to. Although our environment, our community is now aging, so there's more concern about members in their old age of being sick and not having enough on financially, concerns. So these are the things now that we have to address. But other than that, it's a big task for senior leaders to make sure that the environment, both living, non-living, is always kept dynamic. And it's really up to you, brothers, to carry on your role. And as you, again, just carry on with whatever we've started already, you'll be able to touch the hearts and minds of these brothers, that will be placed under you. So that's the end of the talk. Now, if you have any comment or sharing that you may want to do, or questions that we can discuss, wala naman tayong case study. You can just open up. I don't know what
Yeah.
your...
We have 15 minutes for Q&A. So let's take advantage of Randy being here. may question kayo doon sa role and what he mentioned in the talk. By the way, thank you, Randy. Salamat, Randy.
Welcome. Thank you.